24 artists from different generations creating works that can't be contained by traditional galleries or even digital spaces. That's exactly what we're exploring today.
That's fascinating. What makes this collection so impossible to contain?
Well, there's this remarkable piece by Luis Denis Gallardo Castro that the curator Carlos Gomez describes as being like riding a surfboard. These small canvases somehow capture an entire country's essence and movement through the world. It's part of this larger Imago Mundi project that's completely redefining how we think about artistic boundaries.
Hmm. You know what strikes me about that surfing metaphor? It really captures this idea of constant motion and adaptation.
Exactly, and what's really incredible is how this project brings together such diverse perspectives. We're talking about artists spanning multiple generations, from seasoned creators in their 50s to emerging talents fresh from art school. The way they approach similar themes but with completely different cultural and technological frameworks is just fascinating.
Speaking of technological frameworks, that piece titled Pen Drive seems to be playing with some interesting ideas about digital memory and artistic expression.
Oh my goodness. Yes. It's like Gallardo Castro is creating this dialogue between digital storage and human memory. The way he navigates between these different modes of expression really challenges our understanding of what contemporary art can be. And when you consider that this piece is part of a collection that spans Milan, Paris, and New York, it takes on even more layers of meaning.
That's making me think about how globalization has transformed the art world. How do you see these pieces maintaining their cultural authenticity while speaking to a global audience?
Well, what's fascinating is how these works manage to be both deeply rooted and universally accessible. Like, take Juan Luis Maceo Núñez's untitled piece. It's part of this larger conversation about artistic expression across generations, but it maintains this incredibly personal quality that resonates regardless of where you're from.
So it's almost like these artists are creating a new visual language that transcends traditional boundaries.
Exactly. And you know what's particularly interesting? The way different generations approach this challenge. The older artists often bring this incredible depth of historical context, while younger artists tend to incorporate more contemporary cultural references. But instead of creating discord, these different approaches create this beautiful harmony.
That's really reshaping how we think about artistic evolution, isn't it?
You know, it really is. And what's particularly exciting is how this collection represents a turning point in artistic expression. It's not just about the convergence of different generations or the interplay between digital and traditional media. It's about redefining what art can be and do in our increasingly interconnected world.
Well, that's fascinating how they're essentially creating a new vocabulary for artistic expression.
Right? And what makes it so powerful is how it acknowledges both our differences and our shared human experience. These artists are showing us that apparent contradictions like local versus global, digital versus physical, traditional versus contemporary aren't really contradictions at all. They're just different facets of our complex modern reality. Theater superstitions shape entire careers, but none quite like the peculiar tradition of saying Merde French for excrement before every performance. The story behind this odd good luck charm reveals centuries of theatrical evolution.
Now, that's an unusual tradition. What's the connection between well waste and wishing someone good luck?
Well, it dates back to when theater audiences arrived by horse-drawn carriage. The more horses waiting outside, the bigger the crowd, which meant more manure to clean up. So wishing for Merde was actually hoping for a packed house.
Hmm. That's fascinating how these traditions emerged during such a transformative period in theater history.
And speaking of transformation, I've been studying this remarkable 1930 costume design from Fundo do Mar by Maria Adelaide Lima Cruz. The underwater-themed piece, now in the National Theater and Dance Museum, shows how vaudeville was pushing creative boundaries even then.
That must have been quite revolutionary for Portuguese theater at the time.
Oh, absolutely, and what's really interesting is how it coincided with other artistic innovations, like Émile Gall's groundbreaking glasswork. His acid-etched clematis pieces completely revolutionized what artists thought possible with glass.
So, how exactly did his technique work?
Well, imagine layering different colored glass, sometimes 5 or 6 layers deep, then carefully etching away portions with acid to reveal the colors beneath. One wrong move and the entire piece would be ruined. The precision required was extraordinary.
You know what's striking about that period? How these different art forms seem to influence each other.
Exactly right, the flowing, natural forms you see in Gall's glasswork echo the costume designs of the era. The Art Nouveau movement wasn't just about creating beautiful objects, it was about transforming the entire human experience of art.
And these innovations are still influencing modern theater and design, aren't they?
Yes, just look at how modern productions still incorporate those same principles of creating immersive experiences. The Museo Art Nouveau y Art Deco Casa Lis, where some of Gall's work is housed, shows how this movement transformed entire buildings into works of art.
That really puts these preserved pieces in a new light. They're not just artifacts, but part of an ongoing artistic dialogue.
And what's particularly fascinating is how these technical innovations in one field inspired developments in others. The precision in Gall's glasswork mirrors the intricate detail we see in theatrical costume design like that Fondo du Mar piece.
So these weren't just isolated innovations, they were part of a larger cultural transformation.
Exactly. And that's why preserving these pieces is so crucial. Whether it's a Gall vase or a costume design, each artifact tells us something about this remarkable period when artists were reimagining the relationship between art and everyday life.
And here we are, still saying Merde before performances all these years later.
Did you know that Mercury has a scar larger than the distance from New York to Miami? The Caloris Basin, a massive impact crater on Mercury, tells an incredible story of cosmic violence that shaped our solar system billions of years ago.
That's fascinating. How did we even manage to capture images of something so massive on such a hostile planet?
Well, NASA's Messenger spacecraft had to use some incredible engineering to get those shots. The spacecraft needed special thermal protection to survive temperatures that swing hundreds of degrees between Mercury's day and night sides. The images show this enormous depression, about 1,500 kilometers across, created when a massive projectile slammed into Mercury's surface.
So this wasn't just a simple collision. We're talking about an event that literally reshaped an entire planet.
Exactly. And you know what's really mind blowing? While we're looking at these massive impact craters on Mercury, we've also managed to capture incredibly detailed images of Pluto, which is literally billions of miles away.
Hmm. How did they overcome the challenge of photographing something so distant?
So that's where the European Space Agency's Faint Object Camera, aboard the Hubble Space Telescope, comes in. They actually combined four separate images of Pluto's disk using specialized computer processing software. This was back in the late 90s, way before New Horizons gave us those close up shots we're familiar with now.
The level of international cooperation required for these missions is pretty remarkable.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of remarkable observations, let me tell you about these incredible images from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. They captured these massive dark patches on the sun called coronal holes, and get this, the larger one covered about 6 to 8% of the entire solar surface.
Well, that's huge. What exactly are we looking at with these coronal holes?
These are regions where the sun's corona is actually colder and less dense than the surrounding areas. They appear dark in certain wavelengths of light, and they're super important for understanding space weather because they're the source of high-speed solar wind streams that can affect our satellites and power grids here on Earth.
So these images aren't just scientifically interesting, they have real practical applications.
Exactly right. And what's fascinating is how each of these observations requires completely different approaches. The SDO needs special instruments to handle the sun's intense radiation, while Hubble needed incredibly sensitive optics to capture any detail at all from Pluto.
The technical challenges must be enormous for each different type of observation.
You know what's really exciting? These images we're looking at now, as impressive as they are, they're just the beginning. With new telescopes and missions being planned, we're going to see things that will make these look primitive by comparison.
That really makes you wonder what we'll discover next.
Well, imagine being able to see weather patterns on distant exoplanets, or getting detailed views of the ice giants Uranus and Neptune. Each new generation of instruments builds on what we've learned from previous missions, like how Hubble's Pluto observations helped plan the New Horizons mission.
These images really represent more than just pretty pictures of space, don't they?
They absolutely do. They're like chapters in humanity's greatest story. Every image represents decades of scientific advancement, international cooperation, and human determination to understand our place in the universe. And the most exciting part, we're still in the early chapters of that story.
Looking forward to seeing what the next chapter brings.
I was examining this remarkable Diplodocus specimen at the Senckenberg Museum, 28 meters of pure prehistoric engineering. But here's what's truly fascinating. Despite being longer than any other complete dinosaur specimen ever found, it only weighed about 10 tons.
Hmm, that seems surprisingly light for something so massive. How did they manage that?
You know, that's where nature got really clever. The vertebrae were actually hollow, filled with air pockets similar to modern birds. It's like nature invented lightweight construction millions of years before we started using hollow steel beams in architecture.
So essentially, these creatures were walking examples of efficient structural engineering. What other surprising adaptations have you come across?
Oh, you've got to hear about this incredible trilobite specimen, Urbanochile urbani from Morocco. Picture this. It had eyes that literally rose up from its head like tiny towers, allowing it to see above the seafloor while staying safely buried in the sand.
That's fascinating, like having built-in periscopes.
Exactly. And what's really mind-blowing is how these adaptations show up in completely different contexts. There's these traditional Indonesian shadow puppets, wayang kulit, where the craftsman developed these incredibly specific eye angles and eyebrow details that work perfectly in shadow form.
Well, that's an unexpected connection from prehistoric survival adaptations to artistic innovation.
Right? And here's what makes it even more interesting: whether we're looking at the air filled bones of a diplodocus or the precisely angled features of these puppets, it's all about solving problems through specialized design.
Speaking of specialized design, how do modern museums present these connections to visitors?
So, the Senckenberg World of Biodiversity does this brilliant thing where they don't just show you isolated specimens, they create these comprehensive narratives about adaptation and survival. You can literally see how different species solved similar problems in completely different ways.
That really helps put these specimens in context. How do you think our understanding of these artifacts might change in the future?
Well, that's where things get really exciting. With advancing technology, we're constantly uncovering new details about these specimens. Like new scanning techniques are revealing internal structures we couldn't see before, and digital modeling is helping us understand how these creatures actually moved and behaved.
That's such an important point about how science keeps building on previous discoveries.
Absolutely right. And you know what's particularly fascinating? The same specimens that amazed people a century ago are still yielding new insights. It's like each generation adds another layer of understanding to these ancient puzzles.
That really puts our role as observers and researchers into perspective.
And that's why these museum collections are so incredibly valuable. They're not just static displays, they're dynamic resources that continue to tell new stories as our technology and understanding evolve. Every specimen, whether it's a trilobite or a shadow puppet, has more secrets to reveal.
Looking ahead, what do you think might be the next big breakthrough in our understanding?
You know, I think we're on the verge of something really exciting with artificial intelligence and machine learning being applied to paleontology and artifact analysis. We might soon be able to predict and model behaviors and capabilities we never even thought to look for before.